Dave McGillivray.
I'd go with McGillivray.
McGillivray.
There you go.
Damn, I can never say that name right.
That's okay. I can't either most of the time.
So, Dave, you're the race director for the Boston Marathon. And my God, I was looking at some of your accomplishments. I don't even know where to start. Are you ready for this? I thought I was like cool because I've run like 5 marathons in my life. He probably ran 5 marathons this morning. I mean, look at it. So you started at the age of 12, right?
Right. I started running at the age of 12.
What made you get into running?
Well, I grew up in Medford, right outside of Boston here. And my goal as a young boy growing up in this area, given it was so sports orientated with the Celtics, Bruins, Red Sox, Patriots, and so forth, I always wanted to be a professional athlete. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately for me, every time I went out for the team, I got cut. Or when my friends would pick sides in the park leagues, I'd always be the last pick or the no pick.
Yeah.
And, it was really debilitating emotionally to me. And I learned at the young age of about 14 about the concept of rejection.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to overcome. But that's when I started to run because nobody can cut you from running. You just go run.
Yeah.
And I've run about 165,000 miles since then. And so that's why I started to run, because I wanted to be an athlete and you didn't have to be picked.
Yeah. And you would run a mile for every, do you still run the mile for every birthday?
Yeah. When I turned 12, there's a pond right off of Route 93 where I lived, and it's 6 miles around from my house around the pond. So the morning of my birthday, I just happened to get up and run around the pond. So I ran 6 miles. Had cake and ice cream, during the afternoon. Thought, I might as well burn this off, and ran around again. So I ran 12 miles on my 12th birthday. So when I turned 13, I thought, I'll see if I can do 13, and 13, and then 14, and 14, and then 15. And I just kept that streak alive. And when I turned 54, I started at the finish line of the Boston Marathon, ran to the start, turned around, ran back, and ran into Fenway Park in front of 32,000 people. And I've been running my age on my birthday for the last 58 years in a row. And I just turned 70 in August. And people say to me all the time, what the heck are you going to do when you turn 90? And I'm like, well, first of all, I want to be breathing and then get out of bed. And I'll decide when I turn 90. I don't know. But I have a motto in my life, and that is, it's my game, so it's my rules. So I can change the rules if I need to or want to, but so far, so good.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how some people are built for endurance running.
Yeah, I mean, you can be, I don't know if I'm built for it as much as biomechanically. I'm very fortunate that I can and have run so many miles and so many marathons and done so many of these endurance things that I still have my original knees and my original hips. And when I look back at all the guys I ran with back in the 70s and 80s, either they're not running anymore, or, they've had some knee replacements and hip replacements. And I'm one of the lucky ones that I've been able to avoid that.
You haven't had any type of major surgeries or anything?
Not orthopedically. I had heart surgery, but not orthopedic surgery.
Yeah. Wow, that's hardcore. Now, what do you normally do for diet? Do you do the thing that a lot of endurance runners do where they just like load up on pancakes and potatoes and carbs and things like that?
Now, yes, I pay a lot more attention. A few years ago, I was out running and I could feel some difficulty in my chest, and I knew something was wrong, and it persisted. And I went to Mass General Hospital, and we had all these tests done. Echocardiogram, stress tests, pulmonary tests, EKGs. And the doctors all said the same thing. There's nothing wrong with you. I said, yes, there is. I can't breathe when I'm running. I said, you got to give me the big boy tests. Got to look under the hood. So they did a CAT scan and an angiogram, and the CAT doctor walked in and he says, there, and there. I said, there what? He said, there, you have coronary artery disease. I said, nah, that can't be me. And he goes, no, that's you. And I said, genetics, self-inflicted? He said, only you can tell that. And I said, I think a little bit of both. I think I broke some of the rules early on. I mean, definitely heart illness in my family. My dad died of aortic stenosis. My sister has had triple bypass. My brother died of a stroke. My other brother has 2 stents. So I knew there was heart illness in the family, but at the same time, I thought I was the exception to the rule because of my level of fitness. And I learned only a few years ago that just because you're fit doesn't mean you're healthy. And I turned to the doctor and I said, is this reversible? And he said, well, it depends. I said, depends on what? He said, depends on the person. I said, well, you're looking at him. He says, you and your discipline, I think you can have an impact in your own illness. I said, sign me up. That's when I changed everything. I changed my diet, nutrition, my sleep habits. I always thought sleep was overrated. Stress, it was right after the Boston bombings and everything. And I said, I thought because I was fit, I was healthy, and I was wrong.
Yeah.
And because I changed everything, I lost 27 pounds, lowered my cholesterol level by over 100 points. And I had done the Ironman triathlon in Hawaii a number of times, and I wanted to go back. I wanted to use it as a magnet to really get healthy again. And I called them up, and I said, hey, I want to do the race again. Can I? And they said, well, we heard about you and your illness. They said, you got to get a note from your doctor. I said, I've never got a note from my doctor.
Like you're 9.
Like, yeah. So I went to my doctor. I said, can I have a note? And he said, no. And I said, why? He says, I don't want you going down in the lava fields. And I said, well, what's it going to take? He says, we got to do another angiogram and see what happened. I said, all right, do it. He did it, and he said, oh, my goodness. I said, what? He said, you reversed your own serious coronary artery disease by over 40%. And I said, can I have the note? He gave me the note. I went to Hawaii, did the Ironman. What it basically taught me is that I was breaking the rules on nutrition and diet, because I always felt that if I could go out and run 20 miles, I could come home and have a bowl of ice cream.
Right.
Because why? Because I earned it. I earned it.
Yeah.
But it was doing damage. And over a long period of time, 50 years, it almost killed me.
Yeah.
And I was very, very lucky. And, in Massachusetts, they have a public safety campaign that says if you see something, say something. Now my safety campaign is if you feel something, say something. I have 7 friends of mine who are Olympic caliber runners, who went out one day and never came home. They had some sort of heart attack. I have no idea. They weren't around to ask, but I have no idea what happened. But my suspicion is that they probably felt something too, but they just were in denial. And they just felt they were so fit that they can't be unhealthy. Well, yes, you can. Yeah. And I've always felt people like me, endurance athletes, were invincible. And I was really seriously wrong and learned that lesson. And that's why I changed everything.
It's funny because I think that goes for people who are really health cognizant, because I try and pay attention to everything. So I do feel stuff. When I feel something weird, I'm like, let me go talk to the doctor or something, because you know how your body's supposed to work. But I get what you say when you kind of like are in denial, or you kind of go, oh, this feels a little off. It'll go away. But on the other side of the fence, somebody who doesn't necessarily take care of themselves and stuff, they probably feel crappy all the time, but don't even realize it.
You hit the nail on the head. And that's why I've been saying and preaching since my surgery. I eventually went back to Hawaii, did the race, felt great. The next 2 years felt great. And then all of a sudden it came back again.
Yeah.
I went back to Mass General. They did another angiogram, and the heart surgeon said, you have 95% blockage. And I said, I thought I beat this. He says, you can't run away from your genetics. I said, well, what are my options? He said, well, we can do nothing, but you're going to have to live a sedentary life. Cross that off. Mm-hmm. He said, we could stent it, but it's really risky. I said, no, I'm not taking any risk. He said, we can do open heart surgery. And I said, no, I don't want you to cut me open. He said, you've run out of options. I said, well, listen, there's this little race in Boston in April that I've shuffled through a few times, 47 then. And I said, it's in 6 months. If I have the surgery, what do you think? And he gave me the best possible answer. He didn't say, yeah, Dave, I think you can do it, or no, Dave, I don't think you can. He said, I'd be extremely disappointed if you couldn't do it. And that gave me that 4-letter word, hope.
Mm-hmm.
I said, all right, let's do it. I had open heart triple bypass surgery, and 6 months later, I ran my 47th consecutive Boston Marathon. And I've run 15 marathons since then. And people say to me, how can you do that after such surgery? I said, they fixed me. That was the whole thing. They fixed me.
Yeah.
The trauma of the surgery was tough. And that's what also saved me. Two things about the fitness. It didn't prevent the illness because it was in my genetics, but it did make me so sensitive to my own body. I knew something was wrong and I acted on it. Mm-hmm. Whereas my friends didn't, and they never made it home. And the recovery was a lot quicker because I was so fit, and I was able to run a marathon 6 months after open heart triple bypass surgery.
That's unbelievable. We got to go back to the Hawaii Ironman. So Moose, the Hawaii Ironman, that's like, I would say like the Super Bowl as far as Ironman. It was the first one in Hawaii. I think the story is that a bunch of Navy SEALs or something wanted to see who was the fittest of each other. Is that it?
Yeah, that's right.
Did you run the first one?
I did the third one.
You did the third one, okay.
1980, and it was on the island of Oahu at the time. And the first year, there were like 15 athletes. The second year, about the same. The third year is when I did it. I read about it in the May issue, 1979, of Sports Illustrated. And it's a rough open ocean water 2.4-mile swim, which was the Waikiki Beach swim. It was just a swim they always did. And then it was a 112-mile bike ride, but it was a bike race they had on the island. And then it was 26.2-mile marathon, which was the Honolulu Marathon. So these guys in a bar room just said, I wonder who's the fittest, a swimmer, a biker, or a runner. Let's combine the three events that are here on the island and see who wins. And that's how the Ironman got started. Yeah. So when I did it, there was 108 of us who did it at that time. Now there's tens of thousands of people doing it.
Oh, it's crazy. So when you did it, you said you read about it in Sports Illustrated, and then you like made a call. And did you need qualifications at this point?
No, not at that time. You call or you send a letter. Yeah. No emails back in those days. And so it was funny. I went over with two other friends from the Boston area, and we were the first people from Boston to have done it the third year. And we went into the technical meeting the day before, and the race director said, okay, I hope everyone brought a support crew. I didn't bring a support crew. He says, well, there's no water stations out there. There's no directional signs. You need somebody to help crew for you as you go along. I said, I don't have anyone. They threw the phone book at me. They said, call someone. I said, call someone? So I started calling people in Honolulu. And I got
You were calling strangers?
Calling strangers. Hi, my name's Dave. I'm from Boston. I'm doing the race tomorrow. Could you crew for me? And I did get a Navy SEAL guy and his daughter. And they crewed for me that whole day. And there was, like I said, 108 of us. And, I finished 14th. I was a hacker like everyone. None of us really knew what we were doing. The sport was so new at the time. So I did it in 1980, and then I did it again in 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, and 89. So I did it 8 times in the 1980s, and then I did it in 2014 right after my diagnosis, and then I just did it again right after I turned 70 last year in October. So I did it a few months ago.
That is so freaking hardcore. The most I've done is a Olympic distance, which is, I don't want to say what the Olympic distance is because it's nothing compared to
it is. Ironman. It's a mile swim, and it's around a 25-mile bike and a 10K run. It's you got to put them all three together. The funny part about it is when I read about it in Sports Illustrated, I had 2 problems. One is I didn't have a bike, and 2, I didn't really know how to swim. But I said, you can figure it out. You got to do the work and earn the right, and I did.
So you swam almost 2.5 miles, and you really didn't know how to swim.
No,
and for that one, they don't let you wear a wetsuit, do you?
No wetsuits. Oh, no, you're on your own.
And how long did you train for before you jumped in?
Oh, probably about 6 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, dude, you're crazy. What other? Let me look and see if I can find some more achievements. Oh, yeah, there was that time that you ran from Medford, Oregon, to Medford, Massachusetts.
Just a little jog. Yeah,
Just a little jog. And you did that and over the course of how many days?
80
80 days. So you average 45 to 50 miles a day?
a day.
Okay. After I run a marathon, I don't want to move for a few days. I mean, I do, but I don't want to move for a few days. How do you manage running 50, 40, whatever the lowest end, we'll say 45 miles a day, and then you go and you do what to get yourself ready for the next day?
Well, so for me, I heard about a friend of mine who had biked across the country.
Okay.
He biked from Medford, Mass, my hometown, to Medford, Oregon. And I was very impressed with someone biking all the way across the country. And then a thought hit my mind saying, well, I'm not a biker, I'm a runner. Maybe I could run across the country. Now, it's an idiotic comparison, biking and running. But I just said, no, I'm going to give this a shot. So I spent a couple of years just thinking about it and training a little bit for it. And then I was working in the Hancock Tower at the time in Boston. And I looked out the window and I saw Fenway Park. And I said I always wanted to be a professional athlete. My goal in life was to play second base at Fenway. And I saw Fenway, but then I saw a sign out in right field. And the sign said, help make a dream come true, support the Jimmy Fund. Well, I wasn't even sure what the Jimmy Fund was. I picked up the phone, called the Jimmy Fund. A guy by the name of Ken Coleman answered the phone. Ken was the voice of the Boston Red Sox and the executive director of the Jimmy Fund. I said, hi, Mr. Coleman. My name is Dave, and I want to run across the country for the Jimmy Fund. Well, after he picked himself up off the floor, he said, sure, the Red Sox will support you and the Jimmy Fund will support you. I said, deal. I was committed. But then I needed to find out, what is this all about? And I went in and I saw those kids in the Jimmy Fund Clinic. And I knew at the time that the battle that I was about to fight by running over 5.5 million footsteps across this country was in no way as difficult as the battle that these kids are fighting for their own life. And I saw a sign in the Jimmy Fund Clinic, and it said, God made only so many perfect heads. The rest of them have hair on it. And I thought, what a powerful message, because these kids are turning negatives into a positive. They have more guts and more courage than I'll ever have because they want to live, and they're going to fight, fight, fight. And I said, I'm going to help them fight. And because of that connection with doing it for a greater purpose, I honestly believe that's what helped me get across this country and made me be able to do things that maybe I never once thought I could. So I did train, but I wasn't training 40 miles a day to run 40 miles a day. That didn't make any sense. So I had no real idea whether I could actually do this or not until I got out there. So I flew out to Seattle, Washington. I started ceremonially in the Kingdome during a Red Sox Seattle Mariners baseball game, flew down to Medford, Oregon the next day, then started my trek across the country, finished in Medford, Mass., and then ran from Medford the 7 miles to Fenway and finished inside Fenway Park in front of 32,000 people. And ironically, that was August 29th, 1978. The Red Sox were playing the Seattle Mariners again in Fenway. And again, for me, even though I couldn't play in Fenway, I was going to run in Fenway. And that's the night I felt I became the athlete I always wanted to be. So I had to strategically figure out how can I do back to back to back to back 45, 50 miles every day. And all I did was I broke it up. I mean, not a lot of intensity to it. You know, I'm not running 5-minute pace, although I was running pretty quick. I was running 7:15s. I was really fit as a 23-year-old. My PR in the marathon was 2:29, so I know I could run from a 5:30 marathon pace to a 7:30 pace, you know, for a longer distance. So I had a couple of guys with me in a motorhome. Well, I'd start at 6:30 in the morning, every morning at 6:30, leave the motorhome and run 10 miles. They'd meet me 10 miles down the road. I'd take a 10-minute break, 15-minute break, get back out of the motorhome, run another 10. Take another break, run another 10. Take another break, run another 10. That's how I did every single day for 80 consecutive days.
Who figured out the route for you to do it?
I did it AAA Maps. There was no internet.
Yeah.
No, Map My Run or
Right.
GPS or any of that.
So there's people driving the highway just going like, who is this random guy running?
Yes. Who's this random guy out here in the middle of the desert?
Yeah.
And it's 120 degrees, and I'm the only one out there.
Right. So I was going to ask you about weather. So desert, definitely. Now, did you hit any inclement like rain?
Everything.
Yeah.
Well, it's 3 months across America. You can only imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, snow in the Rocky Mountains and nasty weather through the prairies and 120-degree heat, in the desert. But it's funny. I practically didn't even look out the window of the motorhome every morning to see what weather was like because I was running no matter what.
Right.
And I just had to be prepared for any kind of condition. So I've always felt like there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad gear. In other words, you gotta figure it out and get through it without hurting yourself.
Yeah. Now, of all of did I leave any major endurance craziness out? Because you have so many things here.
I mean, right after running across the country, a couple of years later, I ran up the east coast of America from Winter Haven, Florida, back to Boston. But this time I didn't do it alone. I did it with a fellow by named Bob Hall.
Yeah.
Bob was the pioneer of wheelchair racing in America. He was the first one to push a wheelchair in the Boston Marathon.
Okay.
In fact, he's coming back a week from now to celebrate the 50th anniversary of his first participation and effectively win in the Boston Marathon. Yeah. Bobby and I ran up the East Coast together 45 miles a day, again, raising money for the Jimmy Fund.
Yeah.
So that was an amazing thing to do it with somebody else this time.
Yeah. And was he in a wheelchair at the time? Or?
Oh, yeah. He pushed a wheelchair 45 miles every single day.
And you're keeping up with him?
And I'm running with him. Well, he's got to slow down for me going downhill, and I got to slow down for him going uphill.
Yeah,
so we just adjusted our paces accordingly based on where we were at the time. So I did that, and then I did a 24-hour run through 31 cities and communities in southeastern Mass back in the 80s, and ran 120 miles in 24 hours, started in Rentham and finished at halftime of a New England Patriot football game in front of 60,000 people. And then I did a 24-hour bike ride to raise money for charity, bike 385 miles in 24 hours. And then the craziest of all of them was I did a 24-hour swim in a pool, did 1,885 laps nonstop in a pool, other than to get out to go to the bathroom, and swam 27 miles in a pool. So I swam the length of the Boston Marathon. Every time I run the marathon, I say, well, I don't feel that great right now, but hey, it's better than swimming this darn thing. And the latest was only a few years ago, an event called the World Marathon Challenge.
Oh, that's the 7
marathons in 7 days on 7 continents.
Which, how do you... Well, just logistically with time, the time changes and the traveling and stuff, how does that work?
Well, it was all organized by, an event group. Mm-hmm. And there were 50 of us who signed up for it from around the world. This is 6 years ago I did it. And we all met in Cape Town, South Africa. Mm. And we get on a Russian military jet in Cape Town, and flew down to Antarctica. And ran a marathon in Antarctica, just like
what?
6.
Hold on. What?
What? Yeah, ran a marathon.
We can't just glaze past that. Wait. Hold on.
Go ahead.
That's one of the continents.
Hold on.
Yes, sir.
We started in Cape Town.
We got on the plane in Cape Town, flew 6.5 hours to Antarctica, Nova, Antarctica. It's a military base. And we landed there, get off the plane, and the runway of the plane that they just plow, there's no asphalt. We're running on ice.
Yeah.
That's where we ran out and back, and we did, it's like a 4-mile loop. We did it 6.5 times.
Okay, I'm like, what do they have for landmarks in Antarctica?
Where are you going?
Running around circles.
Okay.
A 4-mile loop done 6 times.
What are you wearing?
Wearing 5-6 layers, wearing goggles, because you have to have, or you'll literally, the sun is so bright there that if you don't wear sunglasses or goggles, you can easily go blind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're wearing all this gear, because it's like minus 10 degrees or whatever it was when we were running. Wind chill factor is obviously a lot colder. So the 50 of us finished that, then get back on the plane, fly back to Cape Town,
Yeah.
get off the plane. Now in Cape Town, it's 85 degrees. So we went from like minus 10 to 80, 85. It's like 90-degree difference.
Yeah.
Like only 6 hours later. Get off the plane. So where did we recover? Where did we rest? 35,000 feet in the air on a plane.
Yeah.
That was our hotel for the week, an airplane. Get off the plane, ran a marathon in Cape Town, get back on the plane, flew 12 hours to Perth, Australia, get off the plane, ran the marathon there, get back on the plane, flew to Dubai in Asia, get off the plane, ran a marathon, back on the plane to Lisbon, Portugal, then Cartagena in Colombia in South America, ran the marathon there, and then flew to Miami, South Beach, finished our 7th marathon there. We went through 17 time zones. I basically took my watch off because it didn't matter because there was no such thing as days because it was all one big 168-hour cluster. We had 168 hours to run 7 marathons and circle the earth, and we did.
What do you get for doing this?
7 medals. That was
Medals.
it.
That's
Medals.
it.
That's it. And,
And bragging rights.
bragging rights.
Yeah, endurance people are built different, man. It's
Listen, it's a once in a lifetime. The entry fee was, I didn't pay it because I had sponsors and stuff, but $47,000 entry fee because you got to pay for that chartered jet and all that, But it was an amazing experience. I'll be quite honest with you. I can run 26 miles day after day after day because I did it running across the country. I did it running up the East Coast. I've done it plenty of times.
Yeah.
Although I did it when I was in my 20s and 30s, not 60s, but I was able to do it. And the running part was, I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was the easiest part of all of it. The tough part for me and the part that I got nervous about and thought could get me was sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
I couldn't sleep on the plane, even though I was exhausted. Everyone else is sleeping on the plane, and I'm like awake. I'm like running up and down the aisles, making all kinds of noise to try to wake everyone else up because I said, if I can't sleep, you're not sleeping. This isn't fair. And then even nutrition, because you couldn't take a week's supply of food for yourself, like what you exactly wanted. So whatever they were serving on that chartered jet, you had to eat.
Yeah.
And hopefully it was enough to get you through the next marathon, And it's funny because people would say, well, when's the next marathon? Tomorrow's marathon start. Well, there's no tomorrow. The next marathon starts when we land, like when we get there.
Yeah.
So like the Perth, Australia race, I think we started their time like 2 a.m. Like it didn't matter.
Yeah.
You get off the plane, get on a bus, go to the venue, get off the bus, run the marathon, get back on the bus, get back to the airport, get back on the plane, and go. There's no downtime.
Who's giving you was there like a car in front of you that you followed so you knew the route to take?
They were all like loops out and back.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And most of them were along a path on the ocean.
Yeah.
So you run maybe like 2 miles down, loop around a set of cones, come back, maybe run another 2 miles down this way, run around cones, come back, and do that 4 times, 5 times. So we always saw each other. It was tight, compacted. It wasn't like Boston point to point. It wasn't anything like that. It's just out and backs.
Were you always in the mix of the 50 people? Like, how was it broken out? Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, gunfight, all 50 of us took off.
Yeah.
And, of the 50 people, I was the second oldest of everyone there.
Yeah.
And I ended up finishing like 10th overall.
Oh, wow.
Which was fine. I mean, at 6, I was doing it when I was 64. So I wasn't expecting to win the darn thing. But it wasn't even about time as it was about getting it done, surviving.
I would just feel bad because everybody would be waiting for me to board the plane.
Well,
It'd be like,
maybe
50 people, remember, you're coming in 51st. How are you doing that?
Maybe not, because we had to take off.
Yeah.
Like, we weren't waiting. Like, I think they gave everyone a maximum of 7 hours.
Oh, okay.
Which is plenty of time.
Yeah.
But maybe not on your 4th one or your 5th one. You're walking half or whatever you're doing, right?
Trying to pace yourself.
But we can't we can't hold everyone in the plane for one person who's still out there.
Yeah.
But lucky for us, we had a good group and everyone met the time frame and the plane was able to take off when we needed it to because the clock's ticking.
Right.
And we had to do Antarctica first. because we didn't want it to be in the middle, because if all of a sudden we couldn't fly in there because the weather was so bad,
Yeah.
it would ruin the whole thing.
Right.
So we flew to Cape Town. We checked the weather in Antarctica to make sure that if we're going to do this race tomorrow morning, that the weather's good, the plane can land.
Yeah.
We can get the darn thing done, get back in the plane, get out of there before the weather got nasty again, because every day is different there, right? So that's why it's first, to get that one out of the way, and then most likely the rest of them you're going to be able to do no matter what the weather is. And so for us, it was pretty good weather the whole way. We didn't run into anything really severe. Yeah.
I've run 5 marathons in my life. He ran more than that
In a week.
That is crazy. And you run the so every year,
Yeah.
when the so you're at the finish line for the marathon.
The start.
You're at the
Well,
starting
everything,
line?
all of it. So what happened was I ran the marathon 15 years in a row.
Yeah.
Then I got offered the job to direct it.
Yeah.
So I was like, what do I do?
Which is like a no-brainer, by the way.
Well, it's a no-brainer, but I committed in my own world to run it every year. So how am I going to direct it and run it? I can't do both, right? So I thought. But I got offered the job and I said, I can't pass this up. This is what I do for a living, put on events. The most prestigious endurance event in the world is facing me in terms of being the race director. I got to take the job. I took the job. So I went out to the start, helped everything there, get in a lead vehicle, went down course with the leaders, get out of the lead vehicle, and I'm standing there high-fiving all the runners. And I'm full of something I tell everyone never to be full of, and that's self-pity, because I didn't run.
Yeah.
So I tapped a police officer on the shoulder, and I said, "Officer, do me a favor." He goes, "What?" I said, "Will you drive me back to the start?" He goes, "Why, did you forget something?" I said, "Yeah, I forgot to run." He drove me back to the start, 8 o'clock at night. I started running. I finished across the finish line, dead last, of course. I started 8 hours after everyone at 11 o'clock at night. And so I was the last finisher in 1988 of the Boston Marathon. And I did it that exact way for the next 36 years in a row. I've been the last finisher of the Boston Marathon for 36 years.
Yeah.
And then last year, my 20-year-old daughter said she wanted to run. So I got her in the race, and I said, I can't miss this opportunity of not running with her. So I said, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get everyone started. So I got the wheelchair started, the hand cycles and the duos and the pro men, the pro women, the para athletes, wave 1 and wave 2. And last year I jumped in the back of wave 2 and I ran with her the whole way. So it was the first time I had run the race during the day in 37 years.
Wow.
So it was amazing because even though I've been on the front end on a motor scooter leading the whole race for 36 years and I can see everything, I never was like in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a different experience being in the middle than being right up front. The crowd even gets bigger and larger the later in the day. So there's a lot more spectators out there, when the middle of the pack and the back of the pack are coming through than even the front of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's what I'm going to do again this year. I'm going to get everyone started and then jump in the back of wave 2, and I'm going to run with my son this time.
Nice.
So this will be number 53 consecutive Boston marathons.
This whole time you were running from the finish to the start.
No,
okay.
get driven back out there and run it like everyone. Because I want it to be official.
Right.
We have 4 waves, right? Wave 1, 2, 3, and 4. I just consider myself wave 5.
Yeah. So how many kids do you have?
5.
And they all run?
No. My second oldest has run Boston twice, and my daughter has run it once, and my son is a freshman at Boston College, and
my daughter's going to Boston College next year.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
He runs on the track team, but he just decided just a few days ago that he was going to jump in and if I can get him registered to run with his cousin, so he's going to run it for the first time.
Nice.
As a 19-year-old.
How was that as far as what was your, besides when you were doing the big events and stuff like that, just like an average day of training for you?
Yeah.
And how did that, well, first of all, what were you doing for work before you became the race director?
I was working for a benefit consulting firm in the Hancock Tower, and then I did the run across the country. Yeah. And when I got back, my boss said, "Hey, you coming back to work tomorrow?" I said, tomorrow, I just ran across a continent to raise money for sick kids. I'm going to be on Good Morning America tomorrow. Well, he didn't like that. And 3 days later, he fired me. I went, oh, that's nice. I just ran across the continent and now I got fired. No good deed goes unpunished.
Right.
Then I said, I got to figure this out. But you know something? It was the best thing that ever happened to me because that's not really where my passion was, doing actuarial work. I said, no. So I opened up a running store in Medford, and then I started putting on events to promote the store. And I realized I like putting on events more than shoes on people's feet. And since then, I built my whole business, DMSE Sports, and and I've helped direct or consulted on 1,400 events all over the world, the Olympic Games in Atlanta, U.S. Olympic Trials. I've directed the marathon, U.S. Olympic Trials Marathon, Boston, 38 years. I'm putting on races all over the country. Our next race after Boston is in Omaha, Nebraska for Warren Buffett. Has his shareholders meeting, and he wants to put on a 5K, so he hired us to put on a 5K in Omaha. And then 2 weeks after that, going to Miami and putting on a 10K for Lululemon. So I put on races all over the country, and I have 10 full-time staff and about 100 consultants that work for us putting on all these events. So that's what I do for a living. So I'm one of the lucky ones that has been able to combine my passion with my vocation.
Yeah.
When kids ask me all the time, what do you do for work? I said, I don't. You don't work? I said, not in the conventional or traditional sense of the word, because it isn't 9 to 5 to stay alive. I love what I do so much, I don't consider it work. And a lot of times people say, well, what is it you do? And I said, well, I'm a race director. I said, you're a what? I said, a race director. They said, what the heck's a race director? Chalk mark in the road, yell go? I said, well, yeah, but no. What is it? I said, well, I help raise the level of self-confidence and self-esteem of tens of thousands of people in America. Huh? I said, you'll find out. And that's what this is all about. For me, it's all about making people feel good about themselves. Because that's the foundation by which we accomplish everything in our lives. Right?
Yeah.
So
100%. And that's the thing. The thing with running is that anybody can do it. Anybody. A lot of people, their mentality is, I can't run a marathon tomorrow. Who said you have to run it tomorrow?
Yeah.
Run 10 minutes. And the next day, run 11 minutes.
Yeah.
Or pick a time or distance and just at your own pace, increase it. And trust me, you can, because I've been there with I like to call us the normal people. And it's all sizes. It's all shapes. It's all ages. Perfect example. I ran Chicago now it's probably been a little more than 10 years ago. And when I was running, I remember specifically there was this one guy in his 20s just ripped to shreds. Just boom, boom. Yeah. This is early in the race, right? And I look over, a little while later, and there's this guy, had to be in his 80s, doing the thing that when they're elderly, kind of like the head's hunched down and they're kind of like dragging themselves, but just at a really slow pace. Fast forward a few miles later, and I'm running, and they were separating the runners on the road, having them run like a fork. So what the hell happened? And I look, and the young guy, he was on the ground, head down. They were giving him water. I don't know what happened. He gassed himself out, or he dehydrated or something. Oh, that sucks. As I'm running a little while later, what do I see? The old guy in his 80s just plot. It's the classic rabbit versus hare situation.
Survivor's shuffle. Yeah.
And that was the same marathon, by the way, where a pregnant woman ran the marathon.
Yeah.
Finished. And then said, oh, I think I'm having the baby. Ran to the hospital and had a baby.
Yeah. The stories are amazing. If you have 20, 30,000 people in the race, you got 20, 30,000 human interest stories. And when I get asked all the time, what's the toughest part about running a marathon? I always say the toughest part is signing the application. Mm-hmm. It's just having the guts and the courage to make the commitment. It isn't about I can't. It's do you want to? You have to want to do it. Mm-hmm. If you want to do it, then you have to commit to it, and then you have to earn the right. When I ran my first Boston Marathon, it was in 1972. I woke up the morning of the marathon, and I said, I'm going to go run this race. I was 17, a senior in high school. You had to be 18 years old, but I said, I'm still going to do it. So I called up my grandfather who lived in Brighton, right near the course. I said, Grandpa, I'm going to go run that race in Boston. He goes, oh, they call that the Boston Marathon. I said, well, that's a good name. That's a good name for it. I'm going to go run it. He said, okay, I'll meet you at Coolidge Corner. I said, great. Where's that? He said, 24 miles. I said, all right, Gramp, I'll see you at 24. My brother drives me to start. I take off. I'm running. I got to the hills in Newton, and bam, down I go, flat out in the hills. I got taken to the Newton Wellesley Hospital in an ambulance. My parents picked me up, drove me home. I called my grandfather. No answer. Call him again. No answer. 9 o'clock at night, he answers the phone. I said, Grandpa, where have you been? He goes, Dave, where have you been? I've been waiting for you all night. The old man Kelly goes by. Street sweepers go by. No, Dave. I said, yeah, I know. I quit. He goes, what? I said, I failed. He goes, nah, you didn't fail. I said, no, what'd I do? He said, you learned. I said, great. What'd I learn? You learn you cannot go along in life and set reckless goals. You had no right to be in that race. You didn't earn the right to do it. I said, you're right. He said, I'll cut another deal with you. I said, what's that? He said, you train for it next year. Well, there's a novelty. Okay, I'll train for it. You train, and I'll be here waiting for you. I said, deal. Well, 2 months later, he died.
No.
He died. And I said, I got to do this for Grandpa. And I was a kid possessed. I was 18 years old. I was a freshman at Merrimack College, and I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. I was running 120, 130 miles a week. I was ready to go. And the day before the race, I got sick. My parents said, you can't run. I said, I have to run. The newspapers are saying, Dave, running in memory of grandfather. They said, you're too sick. I said, can you give me something that very few other people have ever given me before? And what's that? A chance. Can you just give me isn't that all we ever want in life, is a chance to accomplish something, to have an impact on our own lives and other people's lives, to accomplish something? I just want a chance. They said, okay. They drive me to the start. I take off. I get to 5 miles. I'm toast. Like, I'm ready to cash it in. I keep going. I get to the halfway point in Wellesley, and there are my parents waiting for me. And there's my mother. And what's she doing? She's crying. Why? Because that's what mothers do. They cry. Because she's so worried about me. She's going through more pain than I'll ever go through. But then there's my father, and what's he doing? He's taking pictures, of my mother crying, I keep going. I do the Survivor Shuffle over the hills where I dropped out the year before, and then right past Boston College at 21.5, bam, down I go again. Dropped out of my second Boston Marathon. And all of a sudden, a defining moment happened in my life. And I turned around, and I'm sitting on the curb right at 21.5 on Comm Ave, right before Cleveland Circle. And I turned around, and I said, this place looks a little familiar. And when I turned around, I saw the Evergreen Cemetery. And that's where they buried my grandfather. And there's his tombstone right there. And that son of a gun said he'd be there waiting for me. Now, he wasn't there physically, but he was there spiritually. And in my head, emotionally, I said, he kept his end of the deal. I have to keep my end of the deal. So I picked myself up and I finished in 4.5 hours, 1973. And I said to myself on that day when I finished, I'm going to run this race every year for the rest of my life and honor and tribute the lesson my grandfather taught me about earning the right. And that's why I've run it the last 52 years in a row.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm telling you, when you find a reason, a purpose, I like to call
Purpose.
it. You might not even remember this. My ex-wife had a brain tumor. She passed away in 2023. But my wife now was running the marathon for the hospital that was taking care of my ex-wife.
Oh, wow.
And in I don't remember what year it was. It was a few years back. She was running it at mile 15.
Yeah.
I remember I saw her at the halfway point, and then I was driving to go meet her at the finish line. And I'm getting, my phone's going off, and it was a number I didn't recognize. And I'm one of those, if I don't recognize the number, I'm not picking it up.
Yeah.
So I kept on hitting with they call it the bitch switch, just hanging up.
Enough.
And all of a sudden I got a text, and it said, this is Dr. something. I'm in the medical tent at mile 15 with your wife. Turn the car around. I go see her. She basically overheated. And she was like, no, I need to finish the race. And they said, you can't. And she was upset. And she looks at me, she goes, I need to finish this race. And I said, you can't finish it, because what you're going to do is you're going to try and, everything in your body's going to tell you to stop. You're going to try and ignore that, and then you're just gonna collapse again. You're lucky that she basically collapsed in front of the medical tent, which was she was very lucky. So I drove her home, and that night she was very upset, and she goes, drop me off where I stopped running the race on Saturday. I want to finish the race. Okay. And I said, okay, that was Monday night. Tuesday morning, we went to bed, go to sleep, wake up. Tuesday morning, I wake up, and I always wake up before her because of the show. And as I woke up, she stops me as I was getting out of bed, and she said, Saturday morning, I changed my mind. And I was like, no big deal. You probably don't feel up to it. I didn't let her finish. She said, drop me off at the starting line Saturday. I'm going to run the whole race. So Saturday, I dropped her off at the starting line. And I mean, it's a couple days later, so everything's still there as far as the starting line, finish line, and stuff like that. She ended up running the whole race. Somehow you found out about the story, and you actually signed the book, and you sent her your medal that year for her.
Look at that, huh?
About 5 years ago or something like that. But yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was very excited about that. But I'm telling you, the whole thing is like when you find a reason, a purpose to run, you're like, I'm doing this no matter what.
A greater purpose is,
yeah.
And it was interesting when I did it for the Jimmy Fund. I went into the clinic and I saw 2 kids, and they said, these kids are your heroes. They're going to cheer for you as you run across the country and do some of your other things. And the girl's name was Tara, a little girl, and a boy's name was Brendan. And so they supported me 2 or 3 years in a row doing all these things. And then I lost touch with them, and I didn't think they made it. I thought they were so sick, and at that time they didn't have the research that they have today. And I lost touch with them, and I didn't think they made it. And then I looked them up in Facebook, and I found them both alive. Tara was living in Florida, and Brendan was in Rhode Island. And then a couple of years later, I was given a motivational talk here in Boston, and this woman introduces me, and then she tells the audience who she is, and it was Tara. And 35 years later, there she is. And it just made me realize, how important it is to give back, to help. You can save lives, and raising money for these nonprofits, or doing it for a greater purpose is just so meaningful. And so that's what I've done my whole life. I've helped raise through my events, and my own charity runs probably $300 million over the years just for all different types of charities and nonprofits.
Wow. Yeah. How much does the Boston Marathon raise as far for all
over
the charities?
The last few years, it's been on average between 30 and 40 million. And then, so 2 years ago it was 40. And then last year it was like 43. And then one person, his name is Rob Hale, he wrote a check in so many words for he ran the race for the first time himself. And obviously someone who's financially well off, he wrote a check for $26.2 million, and he brought the total up to $70 million.
Wow.
So a total of $70 million was raised last year by the 200 charities that are associated with the race. Yeah.
That's insane. So the year I ran the marathon was 2012. I ran it for the zoo. I got a kangaroo named after me, by the way.
Oh, in the zoo?
Well, she passed away, but it was a female kangaroo. I ran it for the Franklin Park Zoo, and they said, for running the marathon for us, we're going to let you name, one of our kangaroos is having a baby. We're going to let you name the baby. And I said, Ramiro. And they said, well, the baby might be a female. And I said, it's going to be a female named Ramiro if that's the case. And it was a female. They named her Ramiro, and she lived for a couple. They sent me a picture, a little plaque and everything. But that was 2012. And the next year, I'll never forget, I do a morning show. I have to take a nap every afternoon. So I'm taking a nap in the afternoon, and I've never seen this before. I got woken up because my phone was vibrating across my bed. I was getting so many text messages that the phone was physically moving. It wasn't vibrating, but it was physically moving across. And I was like, what the hell's going on? So I grabbed my phone. I pick it up, and it was just message after message. Are you okay? What's going on?
Oh, Ramiro
respond to this. Yeah, and I didn't know what was going on at the time. So the first person I responded to, I said, yeah, I just woke up from a nap. Why? And they said, there was a bombing at the marathon. I said, what? Put on the TV, of course, start seeing the coverage of it. Because I remember the year before I finished around the time, it was like a little before, or probably after. I probably would have been on the way, like, you know, near the finish line when the bombs went off. Where were you when that happened? Did you run the marathon that year, though? Did you still do it?
Yeah, so the year before, 2012, was the hot year. It was like 89 degrees. It was awful, right?
Yep.
So when I woke up the morning of April 2013, it was a beautiful day, glorious. I went, finally, we got a good one. I went out to the start, and I had a 26-second moment of silence for the victims of the Sandy Hook massacre.
That's right. That was in 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we had a moment of silence for them. You could hear a pin drop in Hopkinton, but little did I know at that moment that, ironically, 26 miles away and a few hours later, we would be experiencing our own tragedy. Anyways, got everyone started, get on the lead motor scooter, got to the finish, went up to the bleachers, hugged my family, went around, checked everything out, make sure everything is in good working order. And it got to be close to like 3 PM, and I said, I think I'm going to get ready to head back out to the start to do my run because everything is automatic pilot now. Went into the medical tent, hardly any carnage in there because it was a nice day. It was a good day. We didn't have a lot of casualties or medical encounters. So I went back to the start, and I'm standing on the starting line with a few friends that were going to run with me, and the state police. They escort me the whole way all the time, a couple of state police motorcycles, and my phone rang. And it was somebody at the finish saying, you got to get back here. I said, why? They said that there've been 2 explosions. And I'm thinking generator, explosion, something. Like, I'm not thinking bombs. Like, why would that happen, right? But I said, I better get back there. So state police escorted me down Mass Turnpike, like going 100 miles an hour. I got back from Hopkinton and Boston in 20 minutes. I get into the security area. The whole place had been evacuated, so there was hardly anyone around. And I went into the medical tent, and I was in there only a few hours before this, and there was hardly anyone in there. And this time, it was jammed, but not with runners, with a lot of other victims from the bombing. And I was like, oh, my God. And I said, I got to go find my family, because they were sitting in the bleachers. And I went to go up to the bleachers to the finish line from the medical tent. And a police officer stops me. He goes, hey, where you going? I said, I'm going up to the finish line. He goes, no, you're not. And I said, well, I'm the race director. Here's my ID. He says, it's not your race anymore. Oh, okay. So I couldn't get a hold of my family because the cell service got knocked out. And I'm thinking, I don't know. Could they be one of the victims of this?
Yeah.
You know? So I just went back to work, and I started helping the 6,500 runners that got stopped at the Mass Underpass, and trying to get everyone their gear bags back so they could leave, and it was crazy. But then, you know, a couple days later, I finally go home, and my 7-year-old son, who was sitting in the bleachers, who saw everything, said to me, hey, Dad, I never want you to direct that race again. Because now he associated my job with danger.
Right.
You know, and then, but he recovered, and he's the one at BC, and he's the one that's going to run for the first time in a week. And he come up to me like 3 months later, and he said, Dad, remember I told you I never want you to direct that race again? I said, yeah, Luke, I remember. He says, you know why? I said, why? He says, because I want to direct it someday. So I knew he had processed it and worked through it, you know. So that's what we went through on that day. And obviously came back in 2014. We took back Boylston Street. We took back the finish line. Meg Keflezighi, an American won. It was just a recovery day. And you know, everything's been, knock on wood, fine ever since.
Were you a part of like Patriots Day when they went and they like filmed it with the whole like Mark Wahlberg team? That's cool.
Yeah.
That must not cool, excuse me. That must have been like taking a little bit of power back, because you're like, we're going to tell the story our way.
That's right. No, and you know, there's been a lot of documentaries and films, and Jeff Bauman, who lost both limbs in the bombing, he had a movie made about his life. And you know, and again, a lot of, as bad as it was, and you can never sugarcoat it, but as bad as it was, there's been a lot of good that's come out of it. You know, a lot of the victims have started their own foundations, giving back, and you know, just a lot of good, and that's what we're focused on, not the bad, but the good, and that goodness overcomes evil.
Yeah. Were you part of the investigation? Was the FBI asking you questions and things of that nature, or?
Well, I mean, right away there was almost like a gag order, like no one talked to anyone about anything until we sort this all out. Because at the time, you know, there was the chase, right, in Watertown and all that. And so when I got back to the finish, I mean, national media was all over this, and they were just throwing mics. And I said, I can't talk right now. I got to go take care of people, right? So I just avoided all of it, you know. But yeah, I mean, as time went on and things started settling down a little bit, they just wanted information, you know, as to what we saw or what we did, things like that. But I wasn't there when it happened, so I didn't have a lot to say.
Yeah, I remember.
Thank goodness.
When that happened, the first thing I thought of when they caught him,
yeah.
Was this is going to be a movie. It happened on a Monday afternoon, and Friday evening, like during prime time.
Yeah, they got him.
Is when they got him. It was crazy.
Yeah. And
I was working at another radio station at the time, and it had to be. It was Friday. Yeah, it was Friday, I believe it was. First of all, they closed off so many parts of the city.
They closed the whole city, practically.
So I'm like driving to work, and it was the weirdest, most surreal thing, being like the only car on the highway and stuff. But then at the station I was at, we stayed on until about 3 or 4 in the afternoon that day. Yeah.
Wow.
Hardcore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Drove home. I'm exhausted, and I had the news on, and I remember something told me not to go to sleep. Because if I did, I was like, in retrospect, I would have missed the whole thing. But I stayed awake, and I'm like half asleep, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, they got him? They actually freaking got him, which is freaking nuts.
Did they consult you? One last thing about the film. Did they consult you? Obviously, because to recreate a marathon on camera, how, like, were you part of like the brains to like kind of make that come alive, or like?
No, they didn't really consult, to my knowledge. I don't know who they did, but not any of our staff. Mm-hmm. What they did do is, before they went, you know, put it on the silver screen, they had a showing, and they had us come to it and watch it. You know, and like any movie, Hollywood movie, there's a little bit of
they glamorize,
embellishing, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And I noticed some things, and I'm like, I'm not too sure that happened, but
yeah,
you know, they got to do what they got to do. You know, because it always says based on a true story.
Right.
It doesn't say it's all a true story.
Yeah.
What you're watching at the time. So
that's for legal reasons.
I understand why. Yeah.
It's funny because I just thought of this. The year I ran it, I did it was 2012, the hottest one. It sucked.
Yeah, it was awful.
I was at mile 6, and I did one of these, and I could feel the salt on my face, and I said, this is not going to end well. But yeah, it was so bad. But the evening before the or 2 evenings before the marathon, I got invited to just a random event with it was like for the Kenyan runners. And I was like, all right, sure, whatever, I'll go. I had no idea what the event was. And they said, no, it's cool. It's like we get a table of, I don't know, I think maybe sponsors, people who paid or whatever, for dinner, and you each get to sit with one of the Kenyan runners. And I said, all right, cool, whatever. So I sat down, and they were serving I forget what the meal. It's basically what a lot of them eat. Like it was it was like a pasty white doughy thing.
Oh, fufu.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. I've seen
there?
it. No.
Whatever it was good.
It's like a trend on TikTok. Anyway, so I keep going.
Yeah. So anyway, they sit us down. They sit oh my God, what was his name? Anyway, so they sit our runner down, And I think I even did like an interview with him, and I'm BSing with him and joking and laughing. He's the guy that won the marathon that year.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's great.
I have a picture with him.
That's
Oh
great.
my god, good
Yeah.
luck.
After he won the marathon, I went back and looked at the picture, and I'm like, "That's the guy." So I consider myself as I'm consider myself as good luck charm.
That's good.
Have you ever thought of going into coaching? Or have you coached?
You mean runners?
Yeah.
No, I do a lot of motivational speaking to corporate entities, to schools, high schools, colleges, business groups, sales forces, running clubs, everything else. And for me, it's more about not about coaching, but about sharing experiences and what has worked for me and maybe what hasn't. And because everyone's different, I get a little nervous about telling people what to do because everyone's different. And so I've never really got into the coaching thing. It's funny because my son's on the BC track team, and the coach might be telling him to do one thing, and he tells me what the coach told him to do, and either I agree or I might not agree. But I said I'm not meddling in with this. He can't have two coaches or three coaches that'll mess with his head. So you just follow what your coach tells you to do. But like I said, sometimes I'll look at what other people are doing, and I'm saying I could never do what they're doing. For me, it's funny because a friend called me up a little bit ago, and he said, "Have you ever, do you ever have a streak of running every day without missing a day for a whole year?" I said, "No, I've never attempted that." He said, "Do you think you can do it?" And I said, "Do I think I can, or do I want to?" And he hung up. And the idea is to run at least a mile every day for 365 days. So a year later, he just happened to call me. He goes, "Hey, it's Mark." I said, "What's up?" He says, "Did you do it?" I said, "Yep." He said, "You ran at least a mile every day for a year without missing a day?" And I said, "No, I ran at least 3.5 miles every day for a year." And so he said, "Wow." He said, "Well, do me a favor." I said, "What?" He said, "Take tomorrow off." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you'll never stop." It's been over 4 years now,
Really?
and I haven't missed a day in 4 years and 3 weeks.
Wait, we just went through a pretty crappy winter. What are you
Every
doing?
day I'm out there.
And you're going outside
Every day, outside, not on a treadmill.
Wow.
Every single run has been outside.
So is that what your current training is right now? Like what are you doing? About 3.5, you said?
Well, the marathon's in only a week, so like this morning I did like 4 miles easy. Tomorrow I'll do maybe 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And then I'll just really taper for the next week, and because you want to have fresh legs, as fresh as they can be, going into the marathon.
So leading up to the marathon, you're doing marathon training.
Yeah.
Okay, but not when it's after the marathon's done. You're doing what?
Well, like last year, I was training all summer for the Ironman in Hawaii.
Okay.
So I was training between 2 and 7 hours a day, swimming, biking, running. Doing 2 of the 3 disciplines every single day. So you could do a 45-minute swim workout and it'd be pretty good, and you could do an hour run, it'd be pretty good. But when you get on the bike, and you got to be on the bike for at least 3 hours or more to get a really good workout in. Mm-hmm. And then if you want to do a century ride or something, you're talking 6-hour rides.
Yeah.
I got to find 6 hours in a day, a chunk of 6 hours that I don't have. I'm running a business too, right? And it's just, and I have 5 kids, and so it's just hard to find the amount of time you need to properly train for something like Ironman.
Right.
Even a marathon, I can get by with a marathon. I need to start thinking. I've run 170 marathons, but I got to start thinking about maybe backing off a little bit because I want longevity now.
Right.
And I've been able to, like I said before, get away with very little in the injury department. And so I don't want to overdo it and then, regret it.
You married, Dave?
Yeah.
What
and 5 kids.
Yeah. Well, what's your wife say? That she got to be used to it at this point.
Well, yeah. I'm home all day. I have an office, in where my warehouse is and my staff and everything. But I'm at home all the time, other than going out doing stuff like this, right?
Yeah.
So it isn't like, when I run, I might go run at 6 a.m. and everyone's still sleeping. I come back at 7 and they're just getting up. No one missed me,
right?
You know?
Yeah.
So I multitask. I know how to organize and how to delicately balance everything.
Right.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. All right, I got to ask you some random questions now before you get out of here. What is something that you wish you were better at?
Well, this sounds odd, but one of my biggest flaws is difficulty saying no.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get asked to do a lot of different things, or to help a lot of people, or give to a lot of people. Like someone might call and say, will you get me into the marathon? Well, I can't just get you into the marathon, but it's hard just to flat out say that.
Right.
So, I guess I wish I had a little bit more thick skin than I do, because I get in trouble by saying yes all the time. And then it's like, now how am I going to come through with this? So I got to figure out ways to, sort of politely take a pass without having a sense that I'm insulting people, or I don't know. But
without feeling bad.
Without feeling bad.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like multiple people have given that as an answer when I asked that. If you could develop a skill overnight, wake up tomorrow with a whole new skill, what would it be?
Maybe I don't cook at all, and so I regret that, that I didn't begin early on, and now I'm like, why start now?
Yeah.
But I mean, I would say set aside time to learn how to properly cook, instead of just, I don't eat fast foods, but I either have to go out or my wife will cook, but I'm dependent on other people, either a restaurant or a family member, to cook me a meal, because I just don't do it. So that's one thing. It's still on the bucket list, but I'm 70 years old. Like, when the heck am I going to learn how to cook? And it's getting to be a little bit too late, but that's one thing.
Well, back in the hunter-gatherer days, you definitely would have been the hunter.
There you go.
Then you would have brought it back and been like, heat this up.
Yeah.
Heat up this hyena. heat up the saber-toothed tiger.
Right.
Favorite quote?
My favorite, it's actually mine, and it's my game, my rules. I mean, that's my quote. That's what I live by. That's what I try to inspire people by, that it's their life to live. Don't ever let anyone tell you you can't, or you shouldn't, or don't. That, if you want to do something bad enough, like my grandfather said, you have to earn the right. But also know that it's your life to live, and you can change up the rules a little bit and set it up for success and not failure, and be patient and be realistic about your goals.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite quote, and what I use all the time when I sign. I've written 4 books, and so when I sign the books, I use my game, my rules. Yeah.
If you could time travel, would you go to and you can't affect the events, you could just witness whatever it is. Are you going to the past or to the future, and what do you want to see?
I think the past. Why? Because the future might scare me. At least the past I know, and it might be pretty cool to go into the Colosseum in Rome and see the gladiators fight, or something.
Yeah.
Or I've always been fascinated by the pyramids, and just stand on the side behind the curtain and see, how'd they do that?
That's literally mine right now. I'm like, I need to know how they were really built. I refuse to believe the story.
All of that, right? I mean, just to go back in those days and just witness some of that.
Yeah.
The future, like I said, I'm not sure I want to know the future. Only because it's, with all the AI stuff going on and just everything, it's going so fast. And I'm old school. I just am. And but that's okay. When I write a to-do list, it's on a notepad. It's not on my phone, or all the technology stuff. I use what I need to use to keep the pace, but I don't go over the top.
Yeah.
And I just think that's where this is all heading, and it's probably not. It's not where I personally want to go. So
Yeah.
the pass is definitely, the choice.
Well, I mean, the future, I can tell you right now, it's going to be the beginning of the Terminator movie.
Right?
It really is. By the way, though, here's the thing. No matter how good AI is,
Yeah.
people will always need to be active.
Yeah, I know.
And running is something that they all need
It's
to
the common denominator, yeah.
Yeah, and as far as even for sports or anything in life, find me one sport where some form of running will not benefit you.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll be long distance,
Yeah.
sometimes it'll be hard sprints or whatever,
Yeah.
more track work, but there's maybe not sumo, maybe not a sumo guy. Maybe they don't need to run.
Yeah.
But other than that, running benefits you in every way.
When I first started running, it was more a very competitive incentive. Like I wanted to
Yeah.
be fast, and I wanted to run the competition into the pavement. That's
Yeah.
what I wanted. And then in the middle of my life, it became, especially with the heart stuff and all that, it came more about health and fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And now when I run, my adage is, people say, why do you run? Well, I run for a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons why I run is I run to think. And for 40 years, every single day I go out to run when I'm alone, I carry with me a voice recorder, handheld voice recorder.
Mm.
And when I run, I come up with the best ideas, the best thoughts. That's how I manage the marathon. That's how I write my books. That's how I think about my family. I focus on various topics, and I come up with the best possible ideas, and I record them in my voice recorder. And when I get home, I write them down, and then I do them, because they're not leaving the notepad until I check them off, right? So it's an incentive to get them done because you've written them down. But I recorded them. Because I recorded them, I got to write them down. And, I never forget a good thought because I record it, kind of a thing. So for me, I multitask now. Like, I may not feel great one morning and say, I don't feel like running. But then I say, yeah, but I got to think about how I'm going to do such and such. I grab my voice recorder and I go out for a run. I'll go for 5 miles. I'll get home and I'll say to myself, where the heck did I just go? Like, I can't remember the run because I was in a different place. I was just thinking and recording and thinking about something else other than the run. I'm not saying, I feel awful, only 2 more miles. I don't do that. And so I can get through a run a lot easier by doing it that way. And a lot of people are focused on like music and all that stuff, and I'm just focused on thinking.
Yeah. It's so funny. You said you started running it like competitively. When I first started running marathons, it was literally just to have a story, like when conversation,
Yeah.
So the first one I ran was New York. Then I ran Chicago, right? So now I had my conversation. I run a marathon. And I was going to stop at New York, but then my buddy was like, let's go do Chicago. It'll give us a reason to go to Chicago for the weekend. And I said, that made sense.
Right.
So we went and did Chicago. Now I have my conversation piece, right? But what people always do if they're not in the marathon community, and you saw I ran a marathon, they go, oh, Boston? And I said, no, it wasn't Boston. Which one did you run? I go, well, I ran New York and Chicago. Oh, how long are those? I'm like, the same distance as Boston. So that's why I did Boston,
Yeah.
just to be able to say, yes, I did
Okay,
Boston
it is a
too.
marathon.
Why is that one the Super Bowl of marathons?
Boston?
Yeah.
Well, obviously it's the oldest continuous sort of not continuous, but continuous, even though we had the pandemic year.
Because it's not the toughest course. It's
No,
the
and it's
easiest.
not the biggest or anything like that. But because it's the oldest, it's obviously
Historical.
Yeah, because of tradition, history, all the best runners in the world have come here and run on this course. But also what's really elevated to a whole different level is that when it was growing organically, then it was all a volunteer organization. And then they said, how do we control the growth other than just shutting it down? Well, let's develop qualifying standards. And in order to be able to enter, you have to meet a certain qualifying standard.
Yeah.
And at first it was just like 4 hours across the board. And then it was lower than 4, and then it get into genders, and then it get into ages and all that stuff. But because, they wanted to control the field size, they developed qualifying standards. But because they developed qualifying standards, it almost backfired because that incentivized more people to want to do it. And it elevated their own desire to run faster so they meet the standard. So the field size kept growing and growing and growing. But it's the only marathon, other than like the Olympic trials, the Olympic Games or whatever, marathon in the world, truly where the only way you can get in other than a charity bib is to qualify.
Yeah.
So we're proud to be able to say two things. One is we're mainly about the pursuit of athletic excellence. And, so that's really important. And two is we're about quality more than quantity. Other races is bigger and bigger and bigger is better. Not necessarily. The experience isn't as great. When you have a smaller size event, even though 30,000 is a lot of people, at least the experience, could be perceived as being a much positive experience than so many people in the race and waiting in long lines and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
That's why.
Well, is there anything that I did not ask you that I should have?
No, of course, we covered a lot, so I appreciate it very much.
All right, beautiful.
Awesome.
Boston Marathon. It's actually, I'll see you at the. Oh no, I won't see you. We'll be broadcasting live from the starting line around there.
You will?
The day of the marathon.
Well,
Yeah.
that's where I'll be.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I'll see you that day.
Yeah.
All right,
definitely.
cool.
All right.
Dave McGillivray.
Yeah, you got it.
McGillivray. Dave,
Go-
thank you for coming in, my friend.
You're welcome.